Hi. In this video, we will be reviewing the Fresno State General Education or GE pattern, which is required for all majors on campus. Before watching further, please note that this will be reviewing the requirements starting in the year 2021 and after. So if you began prior to fall 2021, your requirements are slightly different and you should consult our previous video on general education. In this video, we will briefly be reviewing the following: lower division general education, upper division general education, and the attached additional degree requirements. And we'll briefly touch on finding course descriptions for GE courses and searching for GE courses at the university. We also have another video that reviews how to find GE courses at community colleges, which will be linked in the description, along with time codes that will let you jump to these different sections if you're already an upper division student or just want to review a specific section. To find the Fresno State GE sheet, you can start at our website or Google Fresno State GE sheet. For our website, you can go to the About page, Forms and Resources, where you can see all of our GE sheets, and go down to the bottom where you can see the normal GE sheet and a specific sheet for our pre-health majors. We'll be reviewing the general 2022-2023 general education requirements, which again are consistent starting in the year 2021. And while we won't be reviewing every single GE area in this, we'll be going over how to select GE courses and which GE courses can generally be beneficial for your major. GE is made up of three primary areas: the foundation, breadth, and integration areas, or lower division and upper division, respectively. The foundation areas, A1, A2, A3, and B4, are unique because they require a minimum of a C grade, which means that for general education courses outside of this area, you can actually get a D and pass. So that would include, for example, your history class. If you received a D, it is considered passing for GE. The foundation area, besides being critical to the rest of your courses and giving valuable skills, is important because it also shows us how to be selective and intentional with general education courses and potential majors, minors, and even certificates. For example, in the first area, oral communication, we have 3 courses and generally can pick any of the 3. But you might ask, well, what is a COM3 or COM7? 3 is public speaking, 7 is persuasion, and 8 is group communication. And this can be beneficial if you're a person who does or does not like to speak publicly. If you don't like to speak publicly, you might benefit from group communication, where you can have a group to speak with, versus if you don't like groups, you want to take 3 or 7. And that's the energy we want to carry through the rest of the GE courses as we pick courses that are generally interesting or easier for us so we can focus on our major classes. With English, this is also similar, as 5B is a split model of the English 10 class, where English 10 is a 1-semester course and English 5A and 5B are that course split over a year. This is also an area that can be commonly cleared with the AP English Language or Literature class. So a good reminder, also linked in the description below, is that AP courses can also clear some of these areas. Critical thinking is our first open area where you just need to take one of a variety of classes. And this is a good example of how some courses can be required for specific majors. For example, the nursing major requires Sociology 3. But if your major doesn't require a specific course, you can generally take whatever's most interesting to you. Similarly, for quantitative reasoning, many majors will require a specific course, which is generally split between statistics type courses, calculus, which is your math 75 and 70 classes, and then math 45, which is more of an introductory math. Crim 50, math 11, psych 42, and PhD 2 are all statistics classes. So if your major requires one of those courses, that's the area you would want to take. Moving to area B, and moving a little bit more briefly, we can see a deceptive area of the GE sheet, which is where numerical courses that are lower aren't always easier. For example, with chemistry, 1A and 1AL are more typically meant for science majors, whereas 3A and 10 are more accessible. Similarly, with biology, biology 1A is the more difficult class, while 10 is typically the more accessible class. In B1 as well, too, if you're not a major that requires chemistry or physics, you can also see other classes that are hidden by the names, such as Earth and Environmental Sciences, which is natural disasters and earth science, geography courses, and astronomy, which may be a little bit more accessible if you're not a science major. Finally, with the complicated areas, we have the area C requirements, where you need 1 course from the arts, 1 course from the humanities, and then a third from either. So 2 arts, 2 humanities, but not 3 from one area. And the arts are relatively straightforward. Not every area requires you to actually do art. Some courses like art history, kind of Latin American studies, film studies, or even Drama 62 are learning about types of art or theater. But there are traditional art classes in the art area, and English 41, 43, and 44, which are poetry and fiction writing classes if you want them. Finally, in humanities, you do not need to learn a language as part of the CSU GE requirement. So if you already took courses in high school, you're not required to take another language class if you wanted to. If you want to take a language class, the 1A course in this case actually is the easier class. But you'll notice for some of the more popular languages like Spanish, French, or even CSDS 91, which is the Introduction to American Sign Language, the introductory class is not GE, and so would have to be taken as elective classes if you wanted to learn the language. There are also some non-language classes in this area: humanities, linguistics, philosophy, and the English 20 and 30 classes, which are non-language classes. So if you want to take more traditional classes, are available. So as we can see with the GE areas, each one of these areas needs at least one course taken in them. And generally, if there's a course required for your major, that's the one you'll want to take. These are not always courses that are titled the same. So for example, in my previous example, nursing wanted a sociology class. And you'll want to consult your major advisor or your DPR to see if there's courses that can double count, meaning they'll clear for both GE and your major. As we get into the D1 and D2 area, this is where we see our first change starting in 2021, as political science is no longer a GE course, but now an additional major requirement, but still does need to be completed. American history is split between two areas. Social sciences is another area where there's a lot of different options, which are typically required by majors, but if you don't require anything, you can take anything you're interested in. And that's similarly applies to Area E as well, where we typically consider this a much more eclectic area where you have courses like personal finance, personal development, or the University 1 class, which reviews kind of strategies for success in college. Area F, similarly, just needs to have one course taken from the four main areas of Africana Studies, American Indian Studies, Asian American Studies, or Chicano Latin American Studies, all of which these courses will either be a part of or directly under. And this is now different for students starting with in 2021, as this area is now required. That concludes lower division GE, and we will now move into upper division general education. Upper division general education is made up of three areas and is known as the integration area and has two different prerequisites, although only one is typically enforced. We usually recommend these courses be taken around 60 units or junior standing, but that is usually not a requirement. In opposition, the requirement that is actually typically a prerequisite is completion of the lower division area that's respective to that area. So B for IB, for example, and foundation. So if those are already completed, you can usually jump in if you're running out of classes, for example. Additionally, upper division GE cannot be completed at a community college since it's considered upper division, and that credit cannot be brought in from a JC. These areas are typically pretty straightforward, as you'll take one class from each, and they act effectively as a capstone for each of the lower division GE areas. This doesn't necessarily mean that these classes are always harder, but more so that they're more specific. Whereas, for example, in B2, you'll have your introductory life science class. IB would have a class like the environment and public health, which is just generally more specific. Same thing with IC, same thing with ID, although we want to put a note right now for this Anthropology 116W class. But typically these classes just need to be completed prior to graduation, can be knocked out early or taken throughout semesters, and typically can be found online or through different modalities as well. Moving down to the additional degree requirements, which functionally act the same as GE, to the point where we almost consider them GE number 4 and 5. For upper division, we have two area courses, MI and the upper division writing requirement. This is where political science 2 also exists, does need to be completed. So if you didn't complete that as a lower division student or at your junior college, you'll need to take that as it's like a state requirement. But MI previously was a GE area and acts functionally the same. With all four of these areas, GE courses can be double counted with your major or potential minor. GE can be a great way to explore a potential major or minor, and generally just need to be done as soon as possible, but prior to graduation at the minimum. We'll put a note again too with anthropology, but all these courses will have something to do with either multicultural issues or international aspects. And as we move into the last requirement, the writing requirement, we see that all of these courses have the specific W annotation on them as well, which marks them as a W course. Previously, students could take a writing exam, but that is no longer available as the writing exam was removed CSU-wide. So all students will need to complete a writing requirement for their major. Some majors have required classes, and that's typically tied to if you see a course titled after your major. Some colleges, for example, in my college, Health and Human Services, we typically recommend Health and Human Services 116W. But if you're not required to take a specific course, you can generally take whichever one's most interesting or easiest for you. Again, these courses will be tied to all majors on campus, but not all majors will require the same GE pattern. So it is critical that you review your major advising sheet and work with your advisor to make sure you're taking the right courses. Moving briefly in how to search for GE courses and how to look for course descriptions. On our sheet, we've hyperlinked all the GE areas to automatically redirect to the catalog. But if you're not familiar, you can type in Fresno State catalog into Google. And on the left side, we'll see general education courses, which will give you all of the course descriptions for each of these areas. So you're not expected to know this since there's hundreds of classes on the GE sheet. You can also find course descriptions when you search for GE areas, as when we go to the course search, we can type in each area individually, but it'll get kind of exhausting if courses are closed, especially. Or so we can go to the additional search area, go down to course attribute, and this will let us search by either general education, multicultural international, or upper division writing skills. With general education, we're able to search even more specifically by area. And so this will give us all courses in an area. And then as usual, if we click on it, we'll be able to see the description at the bottom. So this is just a brief review on the GE areas. General overview, of course, is just that GE is a requirement for all majors in some capacity, must be completed by the time of graduation, and typically can be met pretty significantly through your major requirements. So it's critical to use both this GE sheet and your advising sheet in tandem with working with an advisor to make sure that you're most efficient as you can be while completing your requirements.